Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Unity of Southtown to our workshop today, where we're introducing our first ministerial candidate, Reverend Bob Uhlar. His wife, Carla, is here with him today. Go ahead. There we go. And today's workshop is going to be Cracking the Bible Code, Esoteric Wisdom for 2021. And so I'm super excited to let Bob get started.
Great.
I'm going to zip my lip and sit down. Sorry, Amy. If anybody online live has questions, please put them in the Facebook comments, and I will be watching for those, and we'll bring those questions to Reverend Bob.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Well, good morning. Or actually, it's good afternoon, isn't it? Well, let's go ahead and start with a prayer. So just take a moment to let go of any thoughts of the past or concerns about the future. Just be here in this moment. And in this moment, we know the truth. There is no separation between ourselves and God. And as we allow that energy that is always here, always surrounding us, always in every cell of our body, we are connecting with something much larger than ourselves. And we set some intentions. We know that we are open and receptive to God's living spirit of truth. We know that we are guided, and that whatever surfaces for us in this day, we ask that what needs to be revealed is revealed, and whatever needs to be healed will be healed. And the intention also to find that right and perfect minister for Unity of South Sound. And now we release this prayer into the spiritual realm and know that perfect results are unfolding. And so it is. Amen. Did everybody get the group of handouts there when you came in? Okay, cool. So this kind of lays out what it is we're going to be covering and how. I want to start out by just talking about the way people learn. I know I learned from somebody about these 4 general categories of comfort level. And so each of us has a way that we're more comfortable learning. Some people like to just have somebody teach them a concept. Other people like to discuss those concepts with other people. Then some people want to share their own opinions and insights, on that concept. And then the fourth one is some of the people want to leave with a practical how-to. So when I do a workshop or a class or with a Sunday lesson, there may be areas you're like, I don't particularly like this style. Those might not be the words that are in your mind, but that's the feeling you've got. It's okay. Recognize that other people, have those particular needs. So let's see if we can hit everybody's needs at some point during the workshop. All right. So we're going to be exploring unity, or Unity's main approach to the Bible. There are others, and so. Here again, if this isn't something you're comfortable with, that's fine. But we'll look at what we call metaphysical Bible interpretation. We're going to look at the symbolism of it. But you'll notice we're going to do what are your expectations? In other words, what do you want to learn by the end of these 2 hours? I'll do an example of interpretation for about 15 minutes. And then we'll break up into small groups. Since we're here in the sanctuary, maybe groups of 2 so that you can sit next to each other and have a conversation. And then we will do that for about maybe 15 minutes. We'll see how much time you feel you need. And then we'll have each group kind of come up and just kind of share what they went through and what sort of insights, what sorts of opinions that you have with the rest of the group. And then at the end of each report, we'll talk about other insights that maybe you got while you were sitting there listening to that. And then we'll move on to the next group. And then I realized I didn't ask about a love offering. Is there a love offering today? I usually, I'm doing this for free. I just didn't know if we were having a love offering on that. And then we'll do the closing prayer. So that's what we're looking at. I'm going to go ahead and grab this flip chart so that at the end of the day, or I keep saying the day rather than the 2 hours, we have a list of what it is we'd like to see covered. And so by the end, if we haven't covered something, I can cover it anyway. So, that idea of what's your expectations today. Somebody be willing to volunteer and write up here while I'm talking? I know that one of the reasons that you're here, so I might as well write it up here right away, is to check out Bob. Yeah, so we're cool. Thank you, Misty. So, and yeah, if you could just kind of, when you stand up, or you can remain sitting down, but go ahead and give your name and just like say, what do you want by the end of the 2-hour seminar? Expectations for today.
Yeah, I check out Bob, for sure. One is certainly teach, I haven't seen in so many deals. For me, Christianity is probably the weakest religion that I know.
Got it.
So I read through all your material,
Uh-huh.
and you answered a lot of questions for me. Sorry.
That's
Hello.
okay. It's
Hello.
for the people watching online. So yeah.
Oh, yeah, the people online. Hi, people online. I forgot.
And
So-
what's your first name?
Nick.
Nick.
So I'm basically here to see how you work
Yeah.
and where you come from, like as a being, and then to learn more about the process of understanding the teachings that you're putting forth,
Sure.
and to get your, I don't know what the word is,
Yeah.
just your vision of what it is here. So
Okay,
it just
got
gave me
it.
a lot of questions.
So he's already got check out Bob, but I'm thinking let's put your skepticism about Christianity. Maybe that's a good.
It's not really skepticism, it's more ignorance.
Okay.
And
Got it.
I'm real big on translation and where's the source material.
Got it. Okay.
That kind of stuff.
Sure. Okay, cool. Thanks, Nick. Anyone else have some questions they want to have answered by the end of the 2 hours, that kind of thing?
I'm Annie, and
Hi,
I
Ann.
just would like to see what you got, Reverend Bob.
Say that again?
I would like to see what you got.
Oh, okay. I'd say that falls under the category check out Bob. So yeah, okay, cool. All right.
I'm Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer.
I am here also to check out your style and see what you're all about.
Okay, cool.
Also, I have to admit, I am not a Bible reader because I have always found it frightening.
Say that again. I didn't.
I've always found it rather frightening to read the
Frightening,
Bible.
yes.
It's never given me comfort.
I hear you. Yeah.
So I was kind of excited to be here today to possibly learn more of the esoteric approach to the Bible. And to
Okay, got it.
unity. Yeah.
Got it. Maybe unscary the Bible. So yeah. Any other expectations or intentions you want to set? Sorry about that. I'll cover the microphone next time.
Hi, I'm Barbara.
Hi,
So
Barbara.
in light of the comments, I just have a hope I want to express, and that's simply to contextualize the Bible.
Got it.
You
Any other expectations, things you want to walk out of here with in 2 hours? Okay, great. I appreciate those of you who gave us some expectations to work with. So like I say, once we get to about 3 o'clock, we'll take a look and see if everybody feels like we've taken care of those things. All right, now, excuse me. I grew up Catholic in Chicago. We did not really do a deep dive into the Bible. I went to a Catholic grammar school, so, kindergarten through grade 8. And, but on Sundays, they would read a Bible passage, every Sunday. So kind of like a lot of you, it's kind of like, just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So when Carla and I had gotten together and recognized we had a relationship, one of Carla's friends suggested we check out Unity in Chicago. And in Unity in Chicago, the minister there didn't focus on the Bible a lot, but mainly because people were like, well, that's scary. I'd rather just talk about spirituality in general. But then he invited one of his classmates who just happened to be, her name was Sally Taylor, and she just happened to be, what did we drop here? Oh, never mind. She just happened to be the head of the Bible department at Unity Seminary. And so she came and did a Sunday lesson. And then she did a workshop that afternoon. And suddenly, so many of us were like, wow, okay, this is a Bible that I can embrace. Because this is a Bible that's written in a lot of symbolism. And once we understand that symbolism, it can make a lot of sense. And it's actually something I can apply to my life in 2021. Now, in your handouts on the very first page, down at the bottom, you'll see I've got books. And this is the website you can jump onto to get these books. But the first one is the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. Now, I know I had somebody here who brought their Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. Here, she's got one with her. And she also brought the Daily Word. The Revealing Word. The Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, started the Unity movement. Myrtle had come down with tuberculosis, and she recognized that she had always been told that tuberculosis ran in her family, so she always assumed she'd get tuberculosis and die of tuberculosis like all of her forebears. And suddenly she goes and hears this speaker out of Chicago, Eugene Weeks. And he started talking about mind over matter and recognizing that our thoughts and feelings create. And she said the main thing she remembered was this line, if I'm a child of God, I do not inherit sickness. And so there was kind of that sense of, you mean I don't have to die of tuberculosis? And over the next 2 years, she did meditations on the chakras, on her organs, and recognized how she had cursed her body so often when she was having illnesses and stuff growing up. And so it was just a matter of kind of deprogramming that energy from the cells of her body. And she cured herself of tuberculosis. Now, her husband, Charles Fillmore, had been a little skeptical about the whole thing, but when she cured herself of tuberculosis, it's like, we got to learn more about this, So they got rolling there. Like I said, this was about 1889. Things got rolling, the Unity movement. And Charles took this approach of a scientist. He wanted to learn more about this process and what Myrtle had learned. And the woman up in Chicago who had taught this guy, Eugene Weeks, her name is Emma Curtis Hopkins. And she's kind of like the teacher of teachers in New Thought. She had splintered off of Christian Science. Now, some of you are familiar with that. Christian Science, powerful concept. The founder of it, Mary Baker Eddy, up in Boston, really got things rolling. But she got frustrated that so many people were doing what people who come to, say, a Unity church do, and that is you're looking at all of these different books and spiritual concepts, and you're blending it all into your own stew, your own sense of spirituality. She didn't want that. what she wanted was to, I'm coughing occasionally here, I'm just kind of clearing out my lungs from this morning. Maybe it's the dampness and stuff too, but so yeah, I'm coughing healthy air at you. So Mary Baker Eddy, and a lot of people who knew her at the time said her ego got a hold of her. And so what she said was that, no, I'm just going to read my book, and then she passes away. So here she made this edict that they would just use that book. So Christian Science now is you come to a Sunday service and they read something from her interpretation of the Bible, and that's it. And so Christian Science has not done as well, like say over the last 75 years because of that, because it kind of got frozen in time and did not have the organic nature that, say, that Unity has, or Centers for Spiritual Living, or other New Thought, congregations. So this Emma Curtis Hopkins, came to Chicago. She kind of said, well, I don't believe what Mary Baker Eddy's approach is, so she just kind of came. She taught Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. She taught Ernest Holmes, who started the Science of Mind, wrote the book Science of Mind, and started the Centers for Spiritual Living, as they're called now. There's also a Divine Science group of about 24 groups of two sisters out of St. Louis who got taught by Emma Curtis Hopkins. And then there's actually a movement in Japan, Saichai no I, which is all of this New Thought stuff that someone managed to learn and bring over to Japan. So at any rate, I'm kind of digressing. So this Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, what happened was around 1920, Charles and Myrtle, having learned all of these various things, they raised the money and started a 10-year research project of what is the symbolism in the Bible? And can we write it down in one place so that people can go look it up? And so over the 10 years, they came up with this Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. It was published for the first time in 1931. And the main contributors to it were these rabbis who were from the Kabbalah movement in Judaism. And a lot of people, it seems like when Madonna announced that she was, studying the Kabbalah approach, that it brought a lot of people's awareness here in the United States to it. But what they had done is carried forward this esoteric wisdom, the sense that, hey, yeah, you can read the words on the page, but a lot of times that don't really make much sense. So what's the spiritual lesson here? And you look at the various things that have come forward to teach us mythology, Star Wars, Harry Potter. Each of these things are stories, but with this idea that it evokes a certain spirituality. And that's true of these various stories in the Bible. Now, when I say stories, I'm talking about the narrative stories of the Bible. So that's what's in the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. It's kind of like, okay, you see the word Jericho. So you look up in the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, what does Jericho mean? Each of these individuals, each of these characters, each of these cities have a connotation to them that you can kind of piece together. And that's what we're going to be tackling today. Now, the Revealing Word glossary was something that was published in the 1950s about various unity concepts that weren't in the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. So that's what the Revealing Word is. Now, you'll see there's 3 books here. The third, fourth, and fifth one. Let There Be Light, Your Hope of Glory, and Be Ye Transformed. And these were written by a Unity minister, Elizabeth Sand Turner, around the middle of the 20th century. And you'll see at the very end of the line, it says, okay, the first one covers Genesis through the Maccabees in the Bible. And then the second one is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the 4 Gospels. And Be Ye Transformed covers Acts through the book of Revelation. So what she's done is she's done what we're going to be doing today. Is she kind of went through the main stories in these books, and so you don't have to spend the time going to the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary and all of that, because she's kind of retrieved this information and put it in what we would call a Bible commentary. So that's kind of your, if you don't feel like you want to do all of that legwork, or more accurately, finger work, that's what you can pick up as one of these books and see it. So that you can find those all, electronic versions too, they're on that website, shop.unityonline.org /catalog/50. But yeah, so that's what, those are some great tools to do what it is that we're doing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on one of these to kind of model what it is like that I'd like to see happen here. And if anyone has a question as we're going through this, just let me know. What I'm going to do is, you'll see that the pages, we got 5 different pages taking some sort of a Bible passage. And then underneath it, I've got crib notes from the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. So these are the things that when you do break up, like in groups of 2, this is what you'll be kind of going over one of these, and then reporting back to the rest of us. I'm going to take page number 5, which is on the back. This was an interesting way that this came to me. When Carla and I were serving our first church out of seminary, in 2003, a woman came to me after church, in the fellowship hall, and she said, I've been reading the Bible from the beginning, and I came across basically this storyline. And she says, Mike, this is awful. It's scary. It doesn't make much sense. I do not want to be acquainted with a God like that, or frankly, what Adam did. Or I'm sorry, not Adam, Abraham did. So what I'm going to do is kind of walk you through this particular Bible passage, and then show you the symbolism of it, and see how it tells a spiritual story that the literal words don't show. So, this is from the book of Genesis, that first book in the Bible, starting with the 16th chapter. You'll notice a little bit farther down, I jump into the 21st chapter. So, the 16th chapter, starting with the first verse. Now, Sarai, Abram's wife, bore him no children. She had an Egyptian maid whose name was Hagar. So after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian, her maid, frankly a slave, and, oops, I lost my place. Oh, okay. Egyptian, her maid, and gave her to Abram, her husband, as a wife. And he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that, and when Sarai saw that Hagar had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. And Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram called the name of his son, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. Then I've got a note here in parentheses, Abram and Sarai both went through some trials and tribulations and had spiritual awakenings, which changed their name to Abraham and Sarah. So in the 21st chapter of Genesis, suddenly Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the time of which God had spoken to Abraham. Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore, Isaac. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, playing with her son Isaac. And she said to Abraham, cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not be heir with my son Isaac. And the thing was very displeasing to Abraham on account of his son. But God said to Abraham, be not displeased because of the lad and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you. For through Isaac shall your descendants be named, and I will make a nation of the son of the slave woman also, because he is your offspring. So Abraham rose early in the morning, took bread and a skin canteen of water, and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, along with her child Ishmael, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered into the wilderness of Beersheba. So before I go on, I could understand why this woman came to me at that first congregation. It's kind of like, this just doesn't make any sense to me. I said, so I'll tell you what, I'll take a look at it, and maybe we can come to some sort of conclusion as to what it's all about. First thing you need to know is when you have a narrative story like this, every character is an aspect of each one of us. All of us have these particular characters in us, and it just depends upon how we sort them out. Now, if it's a male character, I've got all male characters are our thinking nature. All female characters are our feeling nature. Now, I hear you, it's a stereotype. It's okay. This is just the way they wrote 2,000 years ago. But you see it in all sorts of the mythological stories. You also see it in comedies on TV. You think here, I mentioned Star Wars before, but Star Trek, here we are like 1964. You've got Captain Kirk, and Captain Kirk is kind of the reasoning nature of the mind, but then he's got the intellectual, which is Mr. Spock. And then he's got the emotional, which is the doctor. And then he's got someone who just seems to be concerned about the physical, and that's Scotty. And you see this, like I say, over and over, even in Seinfeld. You think about Seinfeld, okay, is kind of the reason trying to pull all of this together. You've got George, who's the intellect, and then you've got Elaine, who's the emotional. And then you've got Kramer, who grabs a hold of any latest trend, and runs with it, right? So you see these things, and it's like because it speaks to something deep within us. Each of us has a thinking nature. Each of us has a feeling nature, and each of us has a what the hell nature, about the physical world. So we've got the male character and the female character. Now, if the characters are married, it means that a balance has come between the thinking and the feeling. Now, a birth means there's a new thought or feeling that's innocent and untarnished has entered your consciousness. Now, it mentions the land of Canaan, that here they dwelt in Canaan for 10 years. So that's the subconscious mind, is Canaan. So whenever you hear them talking about Canaan or Canaanites, it's talking about what's going on in our subconscious mind. Now, Abram represents our first thoughts of faith in God, but still falters when faced with apparent hardships of the physical world, or visible world as I've got down here. After a spiritual awakening, his name is changed to Abraham, which means thoughts fully embracing faith in God for the first time, still wanders as a nomad. You'll see this in various places of the Bible where an aspirant is suddenly added to the name. It's Abram, but then there's Abraham. So there's inhalation, exhalation. And then you see with his wife, Sarai, means bitter, contentious, emotions wrestling with the divine nature. After a spiritual awakening, her name is changed to Sarah. And Sarah is emotions that are noble. So within us, each of us as an individual comes to that point where we try it. As far as the physical world, what we see is what we get. We try that, and it's uncomfortable, it's unpleasant, and then suddenly we have an awakening to, oh, there's another way of doing it. Our spirituality is awakened. Now, Hagar represents emotions that flee spirit, are attached to those apparent hardships of the visible world. And she gives birth to, a new idea at the time, and that's Ishmael. Thoughts that hear God but still are attached to the apparent hardships and materialism of the visible world. And then, of course, the son that's, after they've had the spiritual awakening, the new thought, the new feeling, is Isaac, thoughts of joy, peace, and serenity that come from embracing spirit. And then at the end, we're told that Hagar and Ishmael were sent off into Beersheba, which is the understanding of the spiritual foundation of the visible world. So now that we've got all these pieces of the puzzle, let's put them together. So you've got Abram and Sarai, thinking, feeling nature, trying all of these various things. Like say, the reason I jumped around here is because you see that they're doing various things because they think that's going to be successful, or they think that's the best thing to do, or that's the selfish thing to do, and they're failing, and then suddenly both sides of the consciousness get it. It's like, wow. Okay, there's a new way of doing things. So suddenly Sarah can give birth. And of course, back in those days, in many countries, but especially in the Eurasian area, bloodlines were very important, and giving birth to a new child was important, especially, let's say, back there 2,000, 3,000 years ago. So, again, they come up with a bright idea rather than a divine idea. I mentioned this Sally Taylor earlier, who was the head of the Bible department for many years at Unity Seminary. She talks about there's these bright ideas, and then there's the divine ideas. The bright ideas are kind of like George Costanza and Seinfeld. They come up with these incredible ideas that just are doomed to fail. And then the divine idea is, okay, the idea has come, usually through the intuition, and says, yeah, this is your way forward. So the divine idea comes with all of the energy it needs to succeed, where the bright ideas is like, well, maybe if you add a couple things to it, but just the bright idea. So they get this. So she gets this bright idea, the emotional nature of like, okay, well, if I can't have a kid, why don't you have a kid with Hagar? So they are still embracing all of these faulted ideas. So we're like within ourselves, it's like, well, I'll try this. Gave birth to Ishmael, so Ishmael is there. But then as time goes by, Sarah and Abraham have their own child, Isaac. And as we see, their characters are, okay, Ishmael, thoughts that hear God but are still attached to the apparent hardships and materialism of the visible world. But then Isaac is thoughts of joy, peace, and serenity that come from embracing spirit. I don't know about you, but it was age 29, close to my 30th birthday, that I began this divorce with my first wife and was feeling kind of rudderless, and then God sent me Carla. And we were able to find our way together. So I've had these things that I would do and that I would try, didn't work out, then I had the spiritual awakening, but there's still that inner debate that's going on, between, am I really sure that this unity spirituality thing is going to work? Maybe I need to have my safety net, and maybe I need to have a plan B rather than a plan A. I'm working on my bright ideas. Maybe it might be wise to have a divine idea, So that's what kind of happens here. There's a realization of our thinking and feeling nature, like, we can't keep playing this game between positivity and negativity. So we need to send the negativity out and dispatch it. We don't kill it, but we just kind of sublimate it, kind of send it away from us, arm's length. It's like, yeah, I'm aware that I had this fault earlier in my life, or I had this negative experience, or that I was a child of an alcoholic father. These things are there. I don't try to eliminate them, but I have sublimated them. I don't have that emotional attachment to them anymore. So Abraham rose early in the morning, took bread and a skin canteen of water, gave it to Hagar, put it on her shoulder along with the child Ishmael, and sent her away as she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. Beersheba is the understanding of the spiritual foundation of the visible world. So Hagar, that negativity, like so many of us and so many of the people we know, are wandering around, attached to the trials and tribulations of the physical world, right there underneath our feet. It's all right there. And in Bible symbolism, when they mention the feet, the washing of the feet and knock the dust off your feet, feet are symbolic for understanding. So when God told Moses at the burning bush, take off your shoes for for you're on holy ground, it's like, well, God wasn't worried about getting the carpeting dirty. He was just saying you need to have a deeper understanding. Take off your shoes and stand on that solid ground. So that's kind of what Bible interpretation is about and how we can find these stories. Now, yeah, that applies in 2021. Any questions or comments so far before we kind of break up into smaller groups? Say again? Well, I had chosen these 5 many years ago as kind of the framework of this one. I chose 5 because it's a longer story. It's more complicated. And like I said, I came up with that one because of the confusion, of that woman in the first congregation I served. So I thought, well, let me get into more complexity, and you'll see that the other 4 aren't that complex, really. So, or I shouldn't say that they don't have the same complexity as the number 5. So if you guys are willing to pair up with someone else in the room, I will go ahead and I'll come around and assign each of you one of these that you can cover, and then, like I say, we'll all come back together in about 15 minutes, depending upon if you feel a sense of completion in sorting this stuff out. So does that make sense? And like I say, I'll come around and assign numbers to you. Fleming. Let's see, I've got about 1:45, so at 2 o'clock we'll come back together. Those of you watching online, just take these 15 minutes, kind of look, just choose one of the 4 in the handouts. And if for some reason you didn't get the handouts, you can just shoot me an email, I'll send it to you, or shoot an email here to the church. My email address is my name, Bob Uhlar, BOBUHLAR, @yahoo.com. Okay, is everybody ready? What I'm going to ask you to do from this point forward is you got two groups who did each one of these four. So I'm going to have like a group come up here, the two groups, have you go ahead and read, the page as far as, okay, here's the Bible passage, and here are the excerpts from the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, and these are the insights or the spiritual lesson that I see that's here in this story. So like I say, go ahead and read this and then give your stuff. And then those of you who are listening to the rest, if you've got an insight or an idea that's come to you. One of the fascinating things about Bible interpretation is you can read a passage and do this exercise, I can, and I'll get different lessons because my experience in life resonates with a particular thing. So if you're in disagreement, nothing wrong with that. And if you have an insight that hasn't been mentioned, hey, love to hear it, okay? Okay, I'm going to turn the tables here a little bit. Let's start with the people who did number 4. To come on up here so that we can be supportive of you. And who is the other group that did number 4? Oh, okay, I remember. Yeah, that's right. We canceled that one group out because they had to deal with the situation. So, all right. Yeah.
So our interpretation is divine guidance speaks to the shadow side, directing it to move on from its current state of mind to embrace the higher self.
Before you do the interpretation, so yeah.
Okay. So it's the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, Genesis 19. When morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city." And when they had brought them forth, they said, "Flee for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Flee to the hills, lest you be consumed." And Lot said to them, "Oh no, my lords. Behold, yonder city is near enough to flee to, and it's a little one. Let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my life will be saved."
Sorry, taking a second here. All right, and my life will be saved. Thank you. And he said to him, "Behold, I grant you this favor, also that I will not overthrow the city of which you have spoken. Make haste, escape there, for I can do nothing until you arrive there." Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar. Then Jehovah rained on Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from Jehovah out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. But Lot's wife behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. So, as before, all male characters are thinking nature, female characters feeling nature. Marriage is a balance between thinking and feeling. Birth is a new thought or feeling, innocent and untarnished. Angels are divine guidance, ideas understood by our minds. Lot is our dark side. Go to the dark side. The tendency to prefer the physical world and reject its spiritual underpinnings. City is a state of mind. Zoar, Sodom, and Gomorrah are these 3 low-lying cities representing attachment or addiction to the various pleasures of the flesh that eventually are harmful to us. And flee to the hills is to embrace your spiritual nature, meditate, pray on your upper room, or in your upper room. To me, that meant connect with my higher self. And brimstone and fire is the cleansing of the Holy Spirit, warm activity of the Spirit. And Lot's wife looking back is emotional nature yearning for the good old days, or of attachment or addiction. And pillar of salt, her turning into a pillar of salt is crystallized thoughts and emotions, sometimes appearing as illness, but easily dissolved by either fire or water.
Okay, so back to our interpretation. Divine guidance speaks to the shadow side, directing it to move on from its current state of mind to embrace the higher self. And it instructs us, don't dwell on what was, but we want to step in the direction of God's guidance, but also take the easy route. And God says, that's okay, that's fine. I won't take away your choice. But God won't do anything with our attachments until we decide and move to the higher self. Once you move out of that state of mind, God cleanses and removes all that was. And if there's an emotional yearning that leads or that kind of dwells on the past, it can lead to stuck thoughts and emotions that then will require another cleansing or spiritual awakening.
Thank you. Does anybody else have something that came to mind that you want to share about this particular story and interpretation? You say yes, no. Oh. Okay. Anybody? Okay. Yeah, just put my 2 cents worth in. Anyone who's had a strong emotional attachment or an addiction or knows somebody like this, is kind of familiar with this story. The divine guidance comes like, hey man, you need to get your stuff together. And you need to let go of this addiction. But the guidance comes as like, well, okay, but what if I need to, have a small snort or whatever? And so, yeah, it's like, hey, God, as we know God to be, this God presence, is loving no matter what. And here again, anyone who's been in a 12-step group, it's like, hey, you fall off the wagon occasionally, and it's like, okay, you need to come back. You need to kind of once again prove to yourself that you don't need to do it that way. So that's kind of what we got here. Yeah, Nick.
This may be a total non sequitur, but one of the problems I always have with Christian interpretation is that God's outside of us.
Yes.
And that just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's arrogant for anyone to say they are God. They are God.
Yeah.
And that these interpretations, or to me it seems like having enough self-trust to read something, and I was talking to Barbara about this, and allow what you're reading to evoke, not understand, but evoke from your life something that's already there.
I hear you, Nick. Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
I just.
Oh, sure. And, each of these narrative stories is about stuff that's going on inside of us.
Yeah.
So when God speaks or an angel comes, or what they're saying is within us, suddenly that divine idea is there. Or, maybe a negative thought or whatever, like we talk about with someone who's got an addiction. It's like, oh, okay, but yeah, we're all, from the Catholic tradition, we're all cells in the body of Christ. We're all part of God. Everyone sitting here is, another part of God. But we've chosen to come here into this physical world and play this particular game where we can get a much deeper understanding of spirituality.
Yeah,
So
where do you stand about duality?
Well, I'm in agreement with you, Nick, that sense that, we're all part of God. It does seem that, duality was used for one thing, duality was used to kind of impress upon a person who feels like they're separate from God to, to come to some sort of an understanding of God.
Right.
The other aspect of duality is if you think you need to come to me to get answers to your spiritual question, I have more control over you.
That's right.
You know, and of course that's what happened in, you know, the early Christians with the Roman Empire and all that, saying, hey, okay, you know, no more prophets, no more people telling you that, you know, you're empowered yourself, you know, you need to obey the emperor, kind of stuff. So yeah.
And I want to clarify something. You said something earlier about if we get rid of a lot of time, because I've done 12 steps, and people seem to always want to get rid of unhappiness.
Oh,
And it's like,
interesting.
well, if you do that, then you'll never be happy.
Yeah, I hear you.
So to me, the dark and the light are a dance that are driving us, let's say, to Christ consciousness. Without feeling separate from my Christ consciousness, I would never want to move towards it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great insight, Nick. And if we're going to embrace spirituality and we're going to embrace this physical world, we need to embrace all of it, positive and negative,
Yeah.
pleasant and unpleasant. You know, and we've all, well, you can't understand what hot is until you put your hand on the stove. You know, my dad used to say, you can tell you kids that it's hot, but until you put your hand on the stove and burn yourself, you know, you don't really understand what's hot. So yeah. So I'm in agreement with you, Nick. And
Thank
like
you.
you said, most of mainstream Christianity is in that area of duality. And so I do see part of my role is to kind of coach people out of that duality to recognize, no, you know, you're a part of the God presence. You're connected to God. You are divinely guided by God. So yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Other comments, questions? All right. Which two groups did number one? Why don't you go ahead and come on up? Number one? So yeah. And since two groups did it, you know, we'll get like the minority report from the other group, get your own individual insights into what you were learning. So who wants to volunteer to go ahead and read the page, and then, like say, you guys can do your interpretations?
Okay, so our page 1, Jesus cleansed the temple, John 2:13-16, whatever that means. Okay. The Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went to Jerusalem. In the temple, he found dealers selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and the money changers seated at their tables. Jesus built a whip of cords. He drove all of them out of the temple, both the sheep and the cattle. He also poured out the coins of the money changers and turned their tables. He told those who were selling the doves, "Take these things out of here. Stop making my Father's house the marketplace." So the temple equals, or whatever, place of worship, meditation, spiritual contemplation. Jesus represents the Christ or God consciousness facing challenges in our life. Animals, emotions, unnecessary, undisciplined, unproductive. It's kind of unfair to animals. For example, unhappy memories, grudges, feelings of inferiority, feelings of superiority, envy, greed, etc. Doves, peace of mind, confidence in the divine law, non-resistance. Whip of cords. Now this is the one I don't understand actually. Denials, semicolon, short, simple, direct words of truth. That seems like a contradictory statement.
Well, there's a concept in unity called denials and affirmations. So the idea is that you know, say for example, someone's got a cold. You know, so you start out with, "I deny, dissolve, and release any thoughts, feelings, or fears that I need to continue to have this cold." And then you speak the words of truth, which are, I embrace the divine idea of perfect health. and I express it, as quickly as I can, that kind of a thing. So that's why, yeah.
Yeah, I've always had trouble with that one. That's okay.
Sure, no, that's okay. That's okay. So go,
okay.
yeah, go on, and we'll dig into
Okay,
that a little
so
bit deeper.
the money changers and merchants, dealers, we all know about dealers. False beliefs, incorrect sense of values, thinking that there are things more important than God.
So I'm going to summarize because Nick and I did a lot of conversation hither and yon, and simply that this passage in John chapter 2 is one that the consciousness of Christ, represented by Jesus, is what cleanses the mind. And since you have the metaphysical dictionary, I'm wondering if you did the whip of chords as an interpretation. I'd love to hear that. Okay.
We totally agree with what Barbara just shared. And in addition, I'd like to add that Passover is the Jewish feast, and it also is a mental attitude bridging from an old consciousness to a new consciousness. And also that Jerusalem is a habitation of peace, to add to that. And so I believe that all in all, it is about living in our Christ consciousness and living in our divinity rather than our humanity, and endeavoring to do that.
Do you have any answer?
I think the only other thing. Sorry, excuse you. The Father's house is our Christ consciousness. It is the center of man's consciousness and is made manifest to him by mind processes alone. I thought that was the Father's home, yeah.
I hear you. Okay. Thank you. Please. We'll applaud your efforts. Thank you. Other comments? Yes, I'll talk about the whip chords in a moment. Any other questions, comments, insights that you got from all of this? Okay, Sheena.
I like the interpretation of Passover, that coming from old to new. I never thought of it that way, but it's a good way to think about. I'm not good with this. I like the interpretation of Passover as like a coming from old into new, that like rebirth. I know it's such a huge celebration in the Jewish community, but just that thinking of that's how to interpret it is more, it gives to more an understanding of why it's such a full holiday and so meaningful. So.
Got it. Yeah, sure. Other comments, questions?
I was really struck, I really like that living in our divinity, but I was just struck that we have to live in our humanity because that's what we are, but we could live in our divinity more often than living in our humanity. I'm not sure we could choose one or the other. That just came to my mind.
Okay, no, appreciate that.
I always got something to say.
That's okay.
Sorry.
Well, isn't our humanity divinity?
Yes. There is a sense, though, that, and this is where you start getting into the field of opposites, the polarization, like you were saying with duality. That's one interpretation of it, is that if we're here in the physical world, I've got to admit that there is hot, cold, there's up, down, left, right, here, there, those sort of things. So yeah, so humanity is that sense of recognizing the interpretation or the inflection that we're expressing in the world at any given moment. Is that, does that make any sense to you? It doesn't make that much sense to me.
I mean, what you're talking about, I mean, we can't get into this because it's a big subject, but duality is just designation,
Yeah,
right? So if we think of, like I think of God in the Hindu term of Atman,
Oh,
that's
okay, yeah.
everything.
yeah,
Everything.
Yeah.
This mask is God. So we're manifest. If we're a manifest aspect of consciousness, then it seems part of the game
yeah,
is that we come into limitation
yeah,
to find our way back.
sure. I hear you, Nick.
Thank you.
When early on, when Carla and I discovered Unity, and I was just kind of in sponge mode, I was having my doubts, is this Unity thing really right? And I had a chance to see the series of interviews Bill Moyers did with Joseph Campbell. I've actually got the DVDs of that. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, Bill Moyers did a series of interviews with Joseph Campbell, who is considered the world's authority on mythology and spirituality. And he felt moved to have these interviews with him, and then Joseph Campbell died later that year. So they presented on PBS these 6 one-hour excerpts from the interviews. And one of the things he said in that was that he went over, I think it was to India, but had a conversation with a guru, and I can't remember if it was Hindu or Buddhist. And he says to him, because when he comes in, they said, do you have questions? Because that's the way they approach it. It's like, okay, let's, hear again, what do you want to, get out of today? He says, if God is everywhere and everything, and there is pain, if there is, just like you were talking about, Nick, all of these things that are unpleasant, how can I say no to that part of the world? And the Hindu guru kind of leaned over and smiled and said, well, for you and for me, our answer to everything is yes. And then he had a conversation for like a good 90 minutes, he said. And he said, oddly, that was the first question that the guru asked his guru, when he was there. So yeah, and I know one of the things I share often is that, we have pleasant and unpleasant, experiences, but there is one unpleasant experience that is incredibly helpful that people tend to shun, and that is sorrow. And when we are experiencing sorrow, allowing that energy to just come out of us, especially in the torso and the heart, being willing to cry, be willing to just sob and wail, and just acknowledge the spiritual, physical, and emotional connection we have with somebody who's passed away, or with another loved one. We're talking. Carla and I had birds, parrots, for many years, and we had to put down the second parent that we had just a couple of years ago, and just being willing to embrace that. Be willing to walk through that valley of the shadow of death, So yeah, there's nothing wrong with that, and I also encourage people who feel uncomfortable going to comfort somebody who's going through grief or sorrow, to just be there with them. It's like, just be there with them, say, you support them, and be willing to say, I'm here for you, and let them talk, let them share the stories that they need to share to kind of reconcile and come to a place of, centeredness again, and allow that, allow those memories to, or allow that person's life to live in the memories of the conversations that we're having. So if you're experiencing depression, that's part of the process. Being willing to recognize that things aren't going the way you wish they would, and examining that a little bit more. Before I bring up group number 2, for those of you who are watching from home, if you have any questions or comments that you want to send on Facebook, great. Otherwise, let's go ahead with the 2 groups who did number 2. Oh, I realized before you start, I forgot to mention the whip of cords. so before you do your report, come on up and just show you, as far as Jesus cleansing the temple, the Passover of the Jews was near, blah, blah. And I'm glad you brought up the Passover being that sense of like, hey, time to move into a new space. But like I described before with my growth, suddenly you get this debate or this conversation going on in your head. Why am I supposed to believe this? So you go to the temple, and all of a sudden, your thoughts are muddled or confused or whatever. You're having a conversation with that part of you that doesn't want to embrace the new spirituality. So the whip of cords, it's interesting because it says he fashioned this whip of cords and drove the animals out. And we have, as I mentioned there to Nick, we have cords. When we speak, we send off a vibration that helps change the molecules in this physical world. So he used that whip of cords, the idea of like, okay, let's get rid of these things. Now, animals are symbolic of a lot of negativity, and I don't know about you, but I've been in contact with dogs, with cats, with birds that are probably have got their stuff much better together than I do. So there's a sense of like, are animals always bad? Well, in symbolism of the Bible, yeah, they're just kind of those base instincts, but I think we all know a little bit better. So thank you for indulging me.
Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me? Okay, we're doing Jesus feeds 5,000. Now, nice thing about that is most of us know the story.
Yeah.
And we've all been told, well, it happened because of this or it happened because of that. But to me, it's that prime example of allowing, of knowing that there's something that you can't see. In this case, they wanted to say no. There were naysayers there. And they wanted to say, no, we can't possibly. And of course, when you allow things to happen, when you allow the outworking of the law, good things happen. That's it.
Why don't you go ahead and just read through the page? We know a lot of people have heard the story, but some people...
Okay, this is from Luke 9, and it's also found in Mark and Matthew. When the apostles returned, they gave an account of him, of all that they had done. Taking them with him, he withdrew himself to a city called Bethsaida. But the crowds were aware of this and followed him, and welcoming them, he began speaking to them about the kingdom of God and curing those that had need of healing. Now the day was ending, and the 12 came and said to him, "Send the crowd away, that they may go into the surrounding villages and countryside and find lodging and get something to eat, for here we are in a desolate place." But he said to them, "You give them something to eat." And they said, "We have no more than 5 loaves and 2 fish, unless perhaps we go and buy food for all these people." For there were about 5,000 men. And he said to his disciples, "Have them sit down to eat in groups, about 50 each." They did so and had them all sit down. Then he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he blessed them and broke them and kept giving them to the disciples to set before the people. And they all ate and were satisfied, and the broken pieces which they had left over were picked up 12 baskets full. Okay, the metaphysical, by the way, I need to say something. I was never really all that interested in the metaphysical interpretation of the Bible. I actually believed, I remember a line from Fritjof Capra, The Tao of Physics: matter is condensed spirit. In addition, I believed that Jesus could actually appear and disappear, so he could make stuff appear and disappear. So I had no trouble with and there's another story in the Old Testament where having to do with oil that just kept on flowing, right? So I had no trouble with the actual interpretation. And I do understand that Edgar Casey said that the Bible has many levels of interpretation.
Yeah.
So I am more focused on, how this whole thing work.
Yeah, yeah.
And I absolutely believe what Jesus said, that this is my commandment, that you love one another.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
as I have loved you. So I believe we are all in this incarnation to learn to love. And that's all there's to it. In the Aquarian Gospel, Jesus said, Christ is love, and love is the Savior of the world. So
I like it. Yes,
Anyway.
I agree with you.
So right now, I am more interested. I was trained as an engineer, but I have a very mystic
Yeah,
tendencies. So
right.
I'm more interested in how we are built up, all the different spiritual levels, and how they interact, and
Yeah.
how we grow spiritually, or how we evolve spiritually. So that's my focus.
Okay, got it, yeah.
So,
Sheena and Carl.
Wow, this is really dense stuff. Carpenter, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but this is like swimming through lava or molten lead or something. I see this story as the story of prosperity. I've always seen it that way. It's a parable. When in the group we become worthy of acceptance, we become enough in the eyes of each other. Drop the mic.
Anything else from any of the five of you that you want to add? Okay, well, thank you. Thanks, you. Anyone else have comments, questions that you want to add? Nick, I'm shocked. You don't want to say anything? You'll notice right underneath the title, it said Gospel of Luke, Mark, Matthew, and John. It's in all four of the Gospels. Those are the four first books of what used to be called the New Testament. Now it's called, the Christian Scriptures. Just to be fair, because, the Old Testament is the Hebrew Bible. And of course the Old and New has connotations to it, doesn't it? So it's rare to find a story that's in all four, because each of the four Gospels were written in, that second half of that first century, long after Jesus was crucified and resurrected, according to the tradition. So the Gospel of Mark was written first, even though Matthew is put first in the Bible. Mark was the first attempt to just kind of write down some of these oral traditions. And that all happened because in the year 70, Jerusalem was basically flattened by the Roman Empire. Because about every 5 or 10 years, a group kind of like QAnon would step forward and cause a lot of trouble in Jerusalem. And so finally, the Roman emperor is kind of like, screw this, flatten the place, flatten the temple, we're done with this. That is not the prescription I would have for our current situation here in the United States, just to put it in there. So essentially, here again, if all of this is happening within us, it's like, okay, we've gone to Bethesda, a fishing town in the Sea of Galilee, a state of mind in which we are open to new ideas. You know, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention the other Bibles. Matthew was written to convince the Jews that this was the Messiah. So when you read through Matthew, you get that bent on it. It's kind of like, okay, because a lot of the Jews are like, hey, our Messiah was going to be this guy who could come in and kick some butt and get these Romans out of Jerusalem. And so they're kind of, well, that must not have been the Messiah, because let's face it, you know, he ended up going through what Jesus went through. Luke was written to talk to the rest of Europe about, hey, this thing that happened in Israel is important, you know, and here's why. And as some people have pointed out, Luke was a good writer. And of course, he also wrote, the writer of Luke also wrote the book of Acts, which comes after these four Gospels. John, though, talked more to the Gnostics of the time. So John has much more of a symbolism angle to it, you know, and so that's why it's hard. It's interesting that you don't find all of the stories in all of the different Gospels, you know, so. So that was the thing. So you've got Bethesda. So Jesus and his disciples, which are kind of that committee of aspects within ourselves, are in a place where things seem to be desolate, but hey, we're in Bethesda, so we're open to new ideas. So we see that there's a need, but there's that aspect of us, it's like, I don't see how this is going to happen. And the Christ consciousness says, hey, latch a hold of the spiritual substance, which is represented by the fish. And by the spiritual substance, and then fish are the ideas, the possibility of increase. 5 are we use our 5 senses. So we've got the 5,000 for, you know, using our 5 senses as long as we need. So essentially, within us, there's that sense of like, okay, we've got a need here, and I don't know how it's going to happen. But I am willing to look to heaven, which means just look away from all that's going here. You know, that sense of trying to figure out how it's going to happen. And say, okay, I'm open. I'm receptive. What do we need to do? And so we bring together, you know, the spiritual substance with the ideas, and the ideas generate the things that we need in the physical world. A lot of times they come through a coincidence or whatever. So that's the whole idea here. And then, of course, at the end, you know, the 12 baskets full. Some of you may be familiar with the 12 powers. The 12 disciples represented our 12 powers, which are, let's see, faith, will, and the reason I'm pointing to myself is we have energy centers in our body that represent this. So we've got will, understanding, power, love, divine order, elimination, strength, wisdom, you know, so all of these things are aspects of ourselves. So you say to the 12 who may be arguing, like I often talk about that committee meeting I'm having in my mind, of it's like, it's okay, guys, it's okay. You know, this is going to work out. And so sure enough, the 5,000 represents all of the thoughts that we have, all of the needs that we have. If we're open and receptive, we'll find a way. Yeah. Well, Carla and I, in recent months, are in the state of what most people call unemployed. And so we got to the point where our visible resources ran out. And suddenly all of these coincidences started to happen. Like, for example, you know, rent assistance from the federal government, unemployment benefits, you know, all of these things that came forward, plus just these cards and letters from, you know, people like, hey, I just wanted to send you some cash, those sort of things. So we went way beyond that point where on that particular date, that I thought everything was going to run out, we continue on to, have all of these coincidences or things or ideas I'll have of like, I need to call so-and-so, or I need to do this, or I need to contact them. Or Carl will tell me, Bob, you really need to do this. And I say, well, you're my wife, so I'm going to ignore you for a while. And then we'll do it. So at any rate, that's kind of my take on the feeding the 5,000. All right, we've got one more group, the two big groups that did number 3, the demon-possessed man from the Gospel of Mark. So, come into the light. Yeah, what do you just read through the page, and then we'll go over your insights and interpretation.
Okay, the demon-possessed man, and that's Mark 5. Can you hear me now? Oh, okay, the demon-possessed man, Mark 5. They came out to the side of the sea, to the country of Gethsemanes. Okay. When they had come out of the boat, they met him out of the tomb, a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, even with a chain. For he had often been bound with feathers and chain, but the chain he wrenched apart, and feathers he broke in pieces, and no one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and bruising himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshipped him. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Do not torment me." For he had said to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him eagerly not to send him out of the country. Now a great herd of swine were feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him, "Send us to the swine, let us enter them." So he gave them leave, and the unclean spirit came out and entered the swine. And the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep banks of the sea and were drowned in the sea.
So generously, strongly organized thoughts can be positive or negative. Let me begin again. The city, Gerasenes, thank you. Strongly organized thoughts can be positive or negative, either faithful or faithless. Jesus represents the Christ or God consciousness facing challenges in our life. A man, any man or any thought. Our name is Legion, the many forms of mental illness. Swine, unclean animals to the Jews. A mobile, lower form of life, primordial thoughts and emotions. Drowned in the sea, an energy form dissolved and purified into spiritual substance. 2002, any polarized energy of the physical world. 0, as long as necessary. 000, emphasized.
Me? Nothing else to read. So, what did we conclude? So we concluded that basically our thoughts, whether they be positive or negative, are dense matter. And if we let them control us, either by, having a big ego, like the positive thoughts might make the ego large, and or the negative thoughts would cause one to suffer, then I think we came to the conclusion that if we can look at things from a higher perspective, a more spiritual perspective, we can send those negative thoughts down to the sea to drown, which doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get rid of them, but it puts them in a different perspective, so they're not controlling us. Does that help? Yeah, okay.
Relating to the possessed demon is when we're in a place of disorganization, and I appreciated the interpretation of that it can be positive or negative or faithful or faithless, but being disorganized is kind of a circle. So I got that that was a place that I might be able to relate to. Possessed man who lived in the past with no physical boundaries to contain him until he came across Jesus or the Christ consciousness and saw the light. And in the Christ consciousness, my interpretation is that that consciousness commands a healing. And to have the swine and the is kind of where the negativity kind of flows downward, and so it would go into the lower forms of life and be sacrificed in the waters and spiritual form. So, but yeah, it's all. I love this interpretation, metaphysical interpretation. So my experience has been in a study with other groups of religions and giving each other's perspective. So, thank you.
Sure, I got one. I mean, after all, when you see something that says the demon-possessed man, I immediately figure this must be about me. And so I began to personalize it, really, and saw there it begins with coming from the far side of the sea to a place of organization and order. And so I see myself as being that mess from the far side of the sea that shows up in a place of order and organization and all this kind of stuff. I get off the boat thinking, this is going to be great. And what happens? All this stuff starts coming out of my mind. This is the demon stuff, it's unfettered thoughts, crazy things telling me that this place of order will never work. It'll never happen. It's what, I've heard called monkey mind, where something comes into place that begins to eat at you, that tells you this will never work. And then you're faced with the spirit saying, hey, we can make this better. And you go, no, don't torment me with that. It'll never happen. And then, after persisting with that and finally giving it over to spirit, the 2,000 swine show up, which is just a lot of work, and they carry away all that negativity, and I become healed. So that's my story there.
Thank you. Did they evoke any other comments or questions regarding this particular story? Okay. I know earlier we talked about, the Sodom and Gomorrah, that sense of addiction. So here, and I love your guys' interpretation. Just I'll go ahead and build on that. Our name is Legion, the many forms of mental illness. It's interesting that there's one sanity, but the psychiatrists and psychologists will pull out the book and talk about all of these other different mental disorders. So yeah, our name is Legion, but hey, if we're willing to follow that divine guidance, we can place all of these things within us in proper order, and then things will begin to come together. Like we touched on earlier, yeah, there are medical things that can be done. There are prescriptions that can be done. I'll probably share this tomorrow, but back in 2011, I was experiencing long-term depression, and one of the many times this woman here saved my life, just kind of keeping me going. But especially, being in Unity, we sometimes do metaphysical malpractice on ourselves. So I'm thinking, oh, I'm a Unity minister. I should be able to snap out of this and all of that. And I found a wonderful counselor who was a retired minister and a licensed mental health counselor. So it was great to spend time with him, once a week. And I tried St. John's wort and all of these various other, natural organic things. And then praying for guidance, Consumer Reports put out a white paper on depression, and it comes with a test, because everybody has times when they're down, but with this from that, it's like, yeah, there's something biochemically going on with me. And so after about 11, 12 months of this, my counselor's like, yeah, why don't you talk to your doctor, and Consumer Reports also pointed out which were the most effective antidepressants, that had been around for a while. And I had a miracle, and that miracle was Zoloft. And within 2 weeks, I was kind of like, oh, God, help me. Why did I fight this for so long? But it did bring that biochemistry back in place, So it can be a mild mental disorder or Carla and I, in the first congregation we served, we had a woman who was schizophrenic. And occasionally she would pop up in the middle of a service to do her commentary about what I was talking about. And her name was Hillary, but there was this one time she popped up when I was talking about the symbolism of Jesus Christ. And she's kind of like, oh, if that's what you believe about Jesus, then I'm leaving. And she got up and left. And I coached everybody in the room, because some people get real tense about Hillary. I said, okay, now whatever thoughts or feeling you're having, embrace love and send love and compassion to Hillary. I said, she has had her challenges. She's, come out of a Mormon background and trying to make sense of spirituality. But she has confided in me that the reason she comes after being kicked out of so many congregations, that she comes to Unity, is because she genuinely feels her connection with God here. So yeah, there can be unpleasant moments, but I recognize we all, they can lead us to a spiritual awareness that we didn't have before. Yes?
We do have a comment online about this particular story. Carol points out, do not torment me is not wanting to face our dark side.
I hear you, yeah. So yeah, you guys really nailed this one. I appreciate that. So that covers all 4 of them. So we got a few minutes here if you've got another question about anything. You know, I can talk to you one-on-one, or if you want to just share it here in these last few minutes, if you're feeling something on your heart you need to share with everybody. Okay. Thank you so much, you know, for being willing to invest a couple of hours with me today. I hope we were able to cover everything here. I kind of, you know, feel like we did, but if we didn't, you know, we can just as far as the understanding, you know, Christianity and what the spiritual tradition grew out of, and to, you know, unscary the Bible and put it into context. So as you go through the Bible, you know, and you'd mentioned other interpretations, this is Unity's main one. But I mean, you can, you know, there are other ways you can approach the Bible. You can approach it as literature. You know, you can approach it literally, you know, that sense of like, oh, these are the words of God and all that. But remember that this stuff was written in Greek. And as far as the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, it was interpreted out of the Hebrew and the Aramaic into Greek, and then it was translated into German, and then translated into Latin, and translated into English. So things get lost in translation. And we've had some wonderful Bible scholars over the last 200 years who are pointing out you know, where there were perhaps errors in something being written, but also finding, you know, the symbolism, like I said. You know, here this was, you know, a project during the 1920s, the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. So I hope, you know, that I've given you a sense that, yeah, you know, this stuff, you know, is useful to us now as long as we understand that, the symbolism in it. And these are the narrative stories, again, like I say, you can go through especially in the early books of the Hebrew Bible, there's all of these hygiene lessons and, you know, and just basically instructions on, you know, how to do things and how to keep your fleshy meat on one plate and your dairy stuff on another plate. You know, these are all things that were very useful. They still are to a point in us recognizing, you know, how things can grow bacteria, et cetera, et cetera. All right, I'm tap dancing. But like I said, thank you very much for just spending, you know, 2 hours with me. I am excited about what I'm experiencing here. I know I'm going to be, you know, I'll be here for the Sunday service tomorrow and then have some more conversations with the Board of Trustees. But give them your impressions of me, give them your impressions of Reverend Turney next week. And I hope to see you all again soon. That's your welcome. Let's just do a closing prayer real quickly. Let's know and trust that what needs to be revealed will be revealed, and what needs to be healed will be healed. We are grateful for this opportunity to get acquainted, and we are ready, willing, and able to understand the divine guidance that's always available to us and put them into motion. And so it is. Amen.